I thought I was the luckiest man alive when she placed the baby in my arms. But little did I know, that moment would become the cruelest lie of my life. My name is Daniel. For most of my life, I considered myself an ordinary man. I wasn't wealthy, I wasn't famous, but I had dreams. Dreams of love, family, and building something meaningful. When I met Claire, I thought those dreams had finally come true. She was radiant. Claire had a smile that could disarm anyone. And when she looked at me, I felt like the only man in the world. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party in Miami. She laughed at my awkward jokes, leaned closer when I spoke, and by the end of the night, she slipped her number into my hand with a playful wink. I was hooked. Our relationship grew quickly, maybe too quickly, but at the time it felt right. Dinners by the beach, long late night conversations, and her sudden declarations of love, it was like living inside a movie. And then, only 7 months into dating, Claire told me she was pregnant. I remember the way she cried when she told me. Her hands shook as she held the pregnancy test, her voice breaking as she whispered, "I didn't plan this, Daniel, but I can't do this alone. I need you." In that moment, everything changed. I wasn't just a boyfriend anymore. I was about to be a father. At first, I was terrified. I wasn't financially ready, my job wasn't stable, and the responsibility weighed heavy. But then, I looked at Claire's tearful eyes, and all fear was replaced with resolve. I wanted to step up. I wanted to be the man she and the baby could rely on. So I proposed. Right there in her apartment, with no ring, no plan, just raw, desperate love. And she said yes. 9 months later, our son Ethan was born. I will never forget holding him for the first time. His tiny fingers curled around mine, his cries pierced my heart, and in that instant, I swore I would protect him for the rest of my life. Claire looked at me, exhausted but smiling. "He looks just like you," she whispered, and I believed her. For the next 8 years, I poured everything I had into being a father. Sleepless nights, diaper changes, first steps, first words. I was there for it all. I worked double shifts just to make sure Claire could stay home with Ethan. I missed out on parties, vacations, nights out with friends, because Ethan was my world. Every time he called me dad, it filled me with a pride I can't describe. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't even imagine, was that behind Claire's loving smiles, behind all the thank yous and I love yous, there was a secret. A secret that would eventually shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. It began subtly. Little comments from Claire that seemed innocent at first. "He doesn't really look like you when he smiles, does he?" she'd say, almost laughing. Or, people always say Ethan has my eyes. I guess he didn't get much from you. At first, I brushed it off. Genetics are strange after all. And Ethan was mine. Of course he was mine. But then, my mother made a comment at a family barbecue. She pulled me aside and whispered, "Daniel, are you sure?" I frowned. "Sure about what?" She hesitated, then said, "Sure that he's yours? He doesn't have a single feature from our side of the family." I laughed it off, but inside, something twisted. It was the first time the thought even crossed my mind. Was Ethan really mine? I hated myself for even considering it. After all, what kind of father doubts his own son? But as the years went on, the doubts grew louder. Ethan struggled in school, and the teachers often mentioned behavioral issues. I tried to be patient, but sometimes I'd stare at him, his hair, his eyes, his smile, and wonder if he was really my blood. One night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Claire and I had one of our worst fights. She accused me of not making enough money, of not being ambitious enough, of not giving her the life she deserved. I snapped back, reminding her of everything I'd sacrificed for this family, and then she said something that froze me. "Maybe if you were actually his father, you'd understand what it feels like to carry this weight." I stood there in silence, her words cutting deeper than any knife. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice low, trembling. She backtracked immediately, shaking her head. "I didn't mean it like that, Daniel. I was angry. Please forget I said that." But I couldn't forget. That night, while Claire slept, I sat alone in the living room, staring at old photos of Ethan. For the first time, I couldn't see myself in him at all. And that's when the thought became unbearable. I needed to know the truth. What I did next would unravel the life I thought I had built. And once the truth came out, there was no going back. At first, everything seemed normal. I was living the life I thought I had always wanted: a steady job, a beautiful wife, and now, a son who was the center of my universe. But as the months passed, little things started to gnaw at me. Lisa became distant, and I chalked it up to the stress of motherhood. She'd brush off my attempts at intimacy, saying she was too tired. When I offered to help with the baby more, she'd get strangely defensive, like I was criticizing her parenting. Still, I pushed those doubts down. She just needs time, I told myself. This is what marriage is: compromise, patience, endurance. And so, I endured. But then came the first real red flag. One evening, I got home earlier than usual. Lisa didn't hear me come in, and as I walked up the stairs, I heard her on the phone. She was whispering, her tone soft, playful even, a way she hadn't spoken to me in months. I froze outside the door, heart hammering in my chest. "No, he doesn't suspect anything," she said, followed by a giggle. I should have barged in right then, demanded answers, but I didn't. I walked downstairs, sat on the couch, and stared at the blank TV screen until she came down, pretending everything was fine. That night, I convinced myself I had misheard, that I was being paranoid. After all, we had a baby now. What kind of monster would she be to be sneaking around? But the thought festered. As the years went by, I worked myself to the bone, providing for our family. Promotions, overtime, sacrifices, all so Lisa and our son could have a good life. But the distance between us only grew. She was affectionate with our boy, but cold with me. We were roommates, raising a child together, not partners. I told myself that as long as my son loved me, I could endure anything. His little hands clutching mine, his eyes lighting up when I came home, that was enough to keep me going. Until one day, a comment from my mother changed everything. We were visiting for the weekend, and my mom was watching my son play in the yard. She turned to me with a puzzled look. "You know," she said carefully, "he doesn't look much like you at all. He has none of our family features. He actually reminds me of someone else." Her words sliced through me like a blade. I laughed it off, pretending not to care, but inside, the seed of doubt that had been buried for years exploded into something I couldn't ignore. That night, lying in bed beside Lisa, I stared at the ceiling, my chest tightening with each breath. What if, what if he's not mine? But then I'd see my son's face, the way he called me daddy, the way he hugged me like I was his whole world. I couldn't betray him with such a thought. I couldn't risk losing him. So, once again, I buried it. Years blurred together. Birthdays, school plays, scraped knees, bedtime stories. I was there for it all. Every memory cemented my role as his father. And yet, the cracks never truly sealed. Lisa's phone habits became secretive. She'd leave the room to answer calls, hide her screen when I walked in. Sometimes she'd be out running errands for hours, unreachable. One evening, after she went to bed, I picked up her phone from the nightstand. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. I'd never crossed that line before. But the phone was password protected now, and I realized with a gut punch that I didn't even know the code. That was the moment I truly felt like an outsider in my own marriage. Still, I clung to the belief that whatever she was hiding, it didn't matter. As long as my son loved me, I could endure it. But life has a cruel way of unraveling lies, no matter how tightly you cling to them. It happened 8 years into our marriage. My son was old enough to start noticing tension between us, though he never said anything. And then, one night, Lisa got a text message that lit up her phone while she was in the shower. I picked it up without thinking. The preview on the screen was enough to shatter the fragile world I had built. "He still doesn't know, does he?" My blood ran cold. My vision blurred. My hands shook so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. In that instant, the last 8 years of my life felt like a cruel joke. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ounce of love I had poured into my family, It all came crashing down with those 6 words. I sat there in silence, the phone glowing in my hand, waiting for her to come out of the shower. My mind was racing, my heart pounding. I knew that everything was about to change, and I was terrified. What I discovered next would not only confirm my worst fears, but also reveal a betrayal deeper than I ever could have imagined. Life went on in its ordinary rhythm: work, school events, dinners at home. From the outside, we probably looked like a picture perfect family. Friends would often say things like, "You're lucky, man." Not everyone finds a woman who's so devoted and a kid who's so bright. I would smile, sometimes even laugh, but deep down, there was always a weight, a whisper I couldn't shake. It wasn't a constant suspicion. I didn't wake up every day thinking, "Is he mine?" But once the seed of doubt is planted, it doesn't die. It just waits. The first crack appeared one evening when I was scrolling through my phone, looking for old pictures to use in a slideshow for our son's school project. I came across photos from when he was a newborn: his little nose, his eyes, his tiny hands. And then I noticed something. It wasn't obvious before, but in that moment, it hit me like a punch. His hairline. It didn't resemble mine at all. Not the shape, not the pattern. Instead, it looked eerily similar to someone else's, my wife's old coworker, the one I remembered her talking about years ago, the one who had come up in conversations a little too often. My heart sank. I told myself I was imagining it. People look like all sorts of things. Genetics are weird. But once you notice something, it's hard to unsee it. That night, lying next to my wife, I couldn't sleep. I kept glancing at her, wondering what secrets might be hiding behind those closed eyes. I almost whispered, "Tell me the truth," but the words died in my throat. Weeks passed, and my paranoia grew. Every little detail about our son seemed like potential evidence. His laugh, his stubbornness, his features. I started comparing him to every man my wife had ever known. It was sick, exhausting, and it made me hate myself. But I couldn't stop. Then, fate handed me something I hadn't asked for. One weekend, we visited my wife's parents. Family gatherings were always chaotic. Kids running around, cousins shouting, uncles drinking. In the middle of all the noise, my mother-in-law called my son over and said with a chuckle, "You're the spitting image of..." And then she stopped herself, mid-sentence. Her face froze for just a fraction of a second. I noticed. "Of who?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, just your mom," she said quickly, patting his shoulder. But her eyes avoided mine. It could have been nothing, but it felt like everything. That moment played on repeat in my head for days. The real turning point came during a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. My wife was on the phone in the kitchen, and I was in the hallway grabbing my jacket. The door was slightly open. She spoke softly, urgently. "No, he doesn't know. He never suspected. Yes, I promise. Just let it go. Please." The silence that followed felt like an earthquake. My whole body went cold. I didn't confront her immediately. I couldn't. Instead, I backed away, heart pounding, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. But from that moment on, my perspective shifted. Every smile she gave me, every kiss, every "I love you" felt like part of a performance. I began watching her differently, studying her every move, who she texted, how long she lingered in the bathroom with her phone, the nights she claimed she was too tired for intimacy. The trust we had built, 8 long years of it, was unraveling thread by thread. I tried to find proof without tipping her off, checked her social media, scrolled through old photos, even dug through our drawers when she wasn't home. But nothing concrete came up. It was all whispers and shadows. Until one day, while cleaning out an old box in the garage, I found something that made my blood run cold. A sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges, buried under stacks of papers. My wife's handwriting on the front. My name. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, a confession, written years ago, apparently never meant for me to see. It started with, "If you're reading this, it means I never found the courage to tell you." And then my world stopped. The letter revealed a truth I had feared but wasn't ready to face. But what it didn't explain was who the real father was. And that was a question I wasn't going to let stay unanswered. The weeks following my discovery were some of the hardest I've ever lived through. Every time I looked at Emily, I saw the woman who once lit up my entire world, and simultaneously, the person who had burned it to ashes. We sat across the dinner table one night in complete silence, the kind of silence that feels like it could suffocate you. She fiddled with her fork, never meeting my eyes, while our son laughed at something he saw on TV in the living room. He had no idea his entire family was hanging by a single, fraying thread. "Are you going to talk to me?" she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "About what?" I said coldly. "About how you lied to me for 8 years? Or about how I've been raising another man's child without even knowing it?" Her eyes welled with tears. "Please don't say it like that. He's still your son. You've been the one raising him, loving him. That's what matters." The words stabbed me deeper than she probably intended. Because in a way, she was right. I did love him. I loved him with every fiber of my being. But the betrayal had poisoned that love, tangled it with confusion and rage. The more she begged me to understand, the more I realized we weren't fighting for the same thing. I was fighting for the truth. She was fighting to keep her lies alive. I started staying late at work. I couldn't stand to be home. The sight of her was unbearable, and the sound of our son calling me Dad was bittersweet torture. But avoidance wasn't enough. I needed answers. I needed closure. One evening, I found myself driving to Mark's address. Yes, the same Mark she had been with all those years ago. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I told myself I just wanted to talk, to confront him, to hear his side. But deep down, I think I wanted a fight. When he opened the door, he froze. He looked older, heavier, but his smirk, the one I remembered from that old photo, was still there. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said. That single sentence nearly pushed me over the edge. "Is it true?" I demanded. "Is he your son?" Mark leaned against the doorframe, almost casually. "Looks a lot like me, doesn't he?" I lunged forward, but stopped myself just short of swinging. If I hit him, I'd lose more than I'd gain. Instead, I turned and walked away, my entire body shaking with rage. It was no longer just about Emily's lies. It was about the life I had built on them. And now every decision I made could either destroy my son or destroy me. That night, I barely slept. The words, the smirk, the insinuation, they played over and over in my head. I thought about hiring a lawyer, about filing for divorce, about demanding a DNA test through the court. But then I thought about my son. What would it do to him to find out that I wasn't his biological father? Would it shatter his identity? Would it ruin his trust in me, the man who had tucked him in every night since he was born? The next morning, Emily caught me staring at him while he ate his cereal. He laughed at something on the cartoon playing on TV, milk dribbling down his chin, and in that moment, I saw nothing but my boy. Mine. Emily's voice shook when she said, "Please don't take him away from me. Don't take his father away from him." And for the first time in weeks, I realized I wasn't just deciding whether to leave her. I was deciding what kind of father I wanted to be, regardless of DNA. But just as I thought I was ready to make peace with the truth, a letter arrived in the mail. A letter that threatened to tear everything apart all over again. The court date was set for a Thursday morning. I don't think I slept more than an hour the night before. My mind kept looping between dread, anger, and exhaustion. 8 years of my life had been twisted into this nightmare. And now, finally, it was supposed to reach some kind of conclusion. When I walked into the courthouse, my stomach was in knots. The wooden benches, the echo of footsteps, the low hum of voices, it all felt surreal. On the other side of the room, Sarah sat with her lawyer, her face pale and tense. She avoided my eyes, but every so often she would glance at me, and I swear I saw guilt flicker in her expression. And then there was Daniel, sitting beside her, swinging his little legs, clutching a toy car. My heart dropped. Even after everything, seeing him still felt like being punched in the chest. He looked up, smiled at me, and whispered, "Daddy?" I froze. What do you even do in a moment like that? Do you return the smile? Do you correct him? Or do you break inside quietly because you know the truth will destroy that innocent word? The hearing began. The judge was calm but firm, laying out the facts: the DNA test, the financial history, the petitions. Sarah's lawyer argued that I should continue paying support because I had assumed the role of fatherhood. My lawyer countered that I had been deliberately deceived for years. I sat there trying to breathe while strangers debated whether my entire life had been a lie. When the judge asked Sarah if she wanted to say anything, she stood up. Her voice shook as she admitted, "I lied. I knew there was a chance Daniel wasn't his, but I was scared. I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want to raise a child alone. So I told him what he wanted to hear." The words hit me like a hammer. Hearing her say it out loud didn't bring relief. It just made the betrayal heavier. Finally, the judge delivered the ruling. I was no longer financially or legally responsible for Daniel. My obligations ended that day. On paper, it was a victory. But in my chest, it felt like ashes. Because here's the truth no one prepares you for. The law can sever ties, but love doesn't work that way. I didn't stop loving that little boy overnight just because of a DNA test. After the ruling, I walked out of the courtroom, but I didn't make it far before I heard small footsteps chasing me. Daniel. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and wet. "Daddy, are you coming home with us?" I swear my throat closed. I knelt down, holding his shoulders, trying not to break apart right there in the hallway. I wanted to tell him everything: the truth, the lies, the betrayal. But he was just a kid. He didn't deserve the weight of adult sins. So I whispered, "I love you, buddy, always. But I can't go home with you this time." His little face crumpled, and before Sarah could pull him away, he wrapped his arms around my neck. That hug, I'll carry it until the day I die. It was the last time I held him. The weeks after were brutal. I'd come home to silence instead of Daniel's laughter. I'd see his toys still tucked in corners of my apartment. I kept waiting for the sound of little footsteps running to me, shouting, "Daddy!" But it never came. Friends told me I should be relieved, that I dodged a bullet, that I had my freedom back. But freedom didn't feel like this. It felt like I'd lost a piece of myself that I couldn't get back. Months passed before I finally gathered the strength to pack away Daniel's things: his drawings, his old clothes, even the little plastic car he once carried everywhere. I put them in a box and stored it in the back of my closet. I couldn't throw them away. They were pieces of a story that had shaped me, even if it had ended in heartbreak. And here's the thing: I've started to heal. Slowly, painfully. I've gone on dates again. I've learned to laugh without guilt. I've started believing that maybe one day I'll have a family again. One built on truth, not lies. But I'll never forget Daniel. He wasn't mine by blood, but for 8 years, he was mine in every way that mattered. And no court ruling, no DNA test can take that away. Sometimes the cruelest lies aren't the ones meant to hurt you. They're the ones told to protect you, because they don't just shatter trust, they shatter love. And when the truth finally comes, it doesn't just change your life, it rips it apart.